Kia ora everyone, welcome to the 2023 Rongotai Debate. Thank you so much for being here, and a big thank you to our candidates for being here today. Big thanks to VUWSA, Voices of Aroha and Generation Zero for putting on this event together. I'm Zoe Mills, I use they, she pronouns, and I'm the co-editor of Salient's news section, and I'm going to be moderating this debate. So debate rules. Audience, we encourage you to get engaged, so that means you can heckle, you can cheer. Do anything you see fit, as long as you're not being overly distracting to the candidates. Feel free to express yourself however you please. Candidates, you're going to have 45 seconds to respond to the questions. Catherine's going to ding the bell once, over here, to give you a 10-second warning, and then we'll just keep dinging the bell until you stop talking, basically. If you're over time, and if you are over time and you're still talking, I will cut you off. After each section, we're going to open it up for like a free-for-all for a couple of minutes, where you can do a right of reply, you can criticise, you can reinforce your point, you can talk over each other, whatever you see fit. We encourage a lively debate, so again, during the right of reply section, feel free to jump in, debate, talk over each other, respond and comment, keep the conversation going, as long as you've given your opponent enough time for them to make a point, interject in any way that you seem fit. This goes for both candidates and the audience. Any words of homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, or discrimination will not be tolerated. You're going to be disqualified, or you will be asked to leave. All good? Awesome. I'm going to give 45 seconds for our candidates to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. Let's start with Julianne. Mic's on.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Julianne Genter. I'm a member of Parliament for the Green Party, and I've spent the last 12 years working in government and out to campaign for the transformational changes that we need to have a fairer society, to take action on climate change, to protect nature. I live in Rongotai with my family, my 2 young kids. It's an amazing electorate. It's got so much going for it, but it could be way better. More than half of the people in the electorate are renters. We need protection for renters ASAP. Is that the end of my time?
That's 10 seconds.
Okay, great. We need better public transport. We need representatives who are going to stand up and fight for the big changes that we need.
Cool. All good. Warning bell. So one ding for 10 seconds, and then Catherine's just going to keep dinging it until you stop talking, basically. Bruce, let's start with you.
Good afternoon. Yes, it works. Good afternoon. I'm Bruce Welsh. I'm the new Conservative candidate for Rongotai. I've lived in Rongotai for 30-odd years, doing lots of stuff in the community, working with lots of the underprivileged in the community, providing some work and some meals for them. I'm an architect, running a business locally, and get around, see lots of houses, lots of different people. And what people really want is much the same. We just want to get on with business as normal, live our lives, achieve what we can for our families, make a good effort and make a difference in this community, and we can do better now. Thank you.
O na mihi mai o ha, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Fleur Fitzsimons, and I'm proud to be Labour's new candidate in Rongotai. I just want to start by acknowledging Zoe and Catherine and VUWSA, particularly VUWSA President Jess, for putting on today's debate. I'm a former student president here at Victoria and an NZUSA co-president, and I really respect student representation and the importance of student voice. I'm really sad that we lost compulsory student membership, but really proud that we've got at least the first year free, because free tertiary education is something that I devoted many years and many hours to campaigning for. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Wanakkam, kia ora. My name is Karuna Muthu. I'm a National Party's candidate for Rongotai. I came to New Zealand almost 30 years ago with $500 in my hand and a disabled child. My wife and I had to work hard to get where we are, and we lived in the electorate for the last 24 years, and I have 3 children. One of them went to university here. I myself went to the law school and university here. I co-founded Law Students International when I was studying, and I know what it is to be a student, and I know what it is to be on a very short bill to pay stuff. Thank you for the opportunity, VUWSA, and everyone who has organized it, and I'm looking forward to interacting. Thank you.
Just a quick note, Sean Rush from the ACT Party pulled out last minute due to an unknown reason, but he was originally confirmed to attend. Cool. First section, cost of living. We all know that the cost of living crisis is terrible. The average cost of rent in Wellington is $250 per person. Maximum amount of living cost someone can take out is $302.32. That leaves $52 a week for food, transport, and medical expenses. How will you support Rongotai students and residents who are deeply affected by the cost of living crisis?
We need to freeze rents. The Greens have been calling for it this whole term. We can put in place rent controls. We can build a lot more affordable, warm, dry homes. The Greens have a comprehensive plan that helps us not only tackle the cost of living and the climate crisis at the same time, but to do that, we have to change the system. And to do that, we need representatives and parties in government that are willing to take on the vested interests who are profiting from the status quo. That's what the Greens are going to do. We're going to change the system, make public transport free, affordable, accessible, limit rises to rents, make your rental properties warm, dry, and ensure there's solar panels so your power payments are lower. We can do all of this.
The increases in cost of living is really a consequence of government borrowing too much, spending too much money. We've gone from 60 billion debt to 150 billion debt in 3 years. That just doesn't stack up. So first of all, you've got to fix that. And that's just by not spending rubbish stuff, just spending on real infrastructure, on real things that count. We need to... And tax cuts, doesn't matter, no. Sorry, so, yeah, let's fix the economy first, and then the cost of living will come down, inflation will come down.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the question, and I do appreciate that it's really difficult for students right now, and Labor has taken a series of targeted measures to try and address the cost of living, things like half-price public transport, taking GST off fresh fruit and vegetables, trying to make sure that we increase allowances in a way that actually addresses the costs that students are facing, as well as record increases to the minimum wage that we didn't see under the national government. There's other things to come, like fair pay agreements, which will make a difference to the lives of students.
National will actually tackle the economy that is in shambles as a result of 6 years of reckless borrowing and spending on ideological projects. We will rebuild the economy so that we can tackle the inflation, reduce the cost of living, so that we can create better jobs, increased income, so the affordability goes up. And we can invest into public services that we all rely upon. Where would the money come from? Nothing is free, folks. You know that. There is no such thing as free lunch. Someone has to pay for it. Who will pay for it?
I'm going to open up to right of reply now. Not any set time limit. You can talk over each other, go for it.
My colleague Chloe Zorbrick ran the People's Inquiry into Student Wellbeing over the last term, and it showed that students are living in poverty-like conditions, like a majority, and there's so much more that government could have done to increase student allowances, to reinstate the post-grad student allowance, to limit the impacts of rent increases. And so that is what I will continue to fight for and what the Greens will fight for. And ultimately, I think the only way we're going to get that change is to get way more Green influence in the next government.
I guess I just want to comment on the National Party's position that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Whereas actually what we know is that they're proposing tax cuts which will undermine public services that the most vulnerable New Zealanders rely on most. So we know what tax cuts mean. They mean cuts to funding for schools and hospitals and the critical public services that New Zealanders rely on. So there's real cost to National's tax cut plan and they're not being honest about it.
hard-working middle New Zealanders and students like you are hurting because of the cost of living. That is because of reckless borrowing and reckless spending on things that it shouldn't be spent, where we can actually invest like healthcare, like education, and that is where National Party will invest in. Now, we did make a pledge. If you like, I'll give you the 8-point pledge that our party leader, Christopher Luxon, made. We would not reduce funding in health or education when we are in government. The hard-working New Zealanders will get to keep the money that they make and spend the money they want to spend where they need to spend, not on ideological projects like Labour and Green would love to do, and spend your money, borrowed money, and leave a debt for you and future generation, then you will have to be paying for it.
So it is about priorities, and what the National Party has made clear is that their priority is property speculators getting to keep more money for investing in property.
You can say whatever you like, but that is not true.
Wealthiest
that is
people
untrue.
getting to keep
That
more
is
money.
untrue.
It's
And
corporate profits.
Green Party wants to spend your money, borrowed money, and your future today so that they can have the ideological shiny projects going from city to Island Bay.
All right.
I mean,
I'm going to, Julianne?
just
Yep.
although there's been a commitment to supposedly keep spending in health and education the same from National, it's not to keep up with inflation. They won't commit to that, and that means real cuts. Real cuts to health and education.
That is also untrue.
To ensure that the very wealthiest people who can afford it can get richer and richer, and we continue to have an unbalanced economy where a few people profit and everyone else suffers.
All right, Karuna, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your point. Just wrap up your point briefly, please.
I know what poverty is. I come from a country where people don't have a shelter over their head, not clothing, food for a day. I lived in poverty myself. I know what it means to work hard, to pay your bills, to educate your kids, and survive. So I know exactly where you are hurting. And I come from a background where I am frugal, save for my children's future. I work hard,
Okay, I'm gonna have to
I
ask you
pay
to
the
wrap it up,
tax,
Karuna.
and I actually create an opportunity where you and everyone else can thrive and realize your true potential. Now, but
Okay, we're going to move on to Section 2 just because we'll run out of time otherwise. Section 2 is transport. Public transport reliability in Rongotai, like the rest of the city, is notoriously unreliable. How will you fix this issue? Let's start with Julianne and move our way down. Yeah, if anyone else wants to start, that's all good as well.
We need greater public ownership of the operation of our public transport services. We need to reverse the crazy neoliberal reforms that were brought in by Labour and national governments in the 1980s and 90s that saw private bus operators who have no accountability to the public, who have not been transparent. Some may be doing a good job, but ultimately, when we own it publicly, then we know we can run it for public good. We need to make it more affordable, make it the true priority of the transport budget, which neither Labour nor National has done yet.
Free public transport is a really good idea, except in the end, as someone has said, someone has to pay for it. So, someone has to pay for it. So a low-cost public transport across the city would be really cool. The problem is we've run out of bus drivers, we've run out of people to do it. We've got to pay them better and bring people back to that. Equally, sending funds overseas for climate change and so on, if we brought that back into New Zealand and used that to pay the bus drivers to run the buses, that would help a heap too. Thank you.
The lack of reliability of public transport is an example of market failure. Public transport is a core public service and should be run like one for the public good. I'm really concerned about the impact of a possible National Act government on fair pay agreements, particularly for bus drivers, who are one of the first fair pay agreements up. And actually, bus drivers are climate warriors because they allow us to get around without relying on our cars. And I want to support our bus drivers because in very, very difficult circumstances, they're doing their very best. We need to play our part and make the system fairer for them.
National will invest in sensible infrastructure of significance for New Zealand. And we have announced that we will build the second Mount Victoria tunnel that would actually ease the congestion in Wellington City. We would also make sure we invest in the public services, including public buses, that will actually get you regularly and frequently from A to B. So that is what we promised, and that is what we would deliver. History speaks for itself. National has always invested in infrastructure that generations actually enjoyed, including Transmission Gully, for example.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question in regards to transport, and then we're going to open up to right of reply. What transport projects will you prioritise as MP for Rongotai, and why is your project the most effective for the electorate? Fleur, do you want to get started?
Light rail to Island Bay, because it will allow the housing growth that we need.
The eastern suburbs need a second Mount Vic tunnel to free up the transport, free up business to operate, save all the wasted time everyone does sitting around waiting.
Light rail to Island Bay and electric ferries to Seatoon and Miramar. We should have those up and running in the next 3 years.
Second Mount Vic tunnel, and also reliable, dependable bus service across the Rongotai electorate. That's what we will say. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to open it up to right of reply now. Who wants to get started?
Why doesn't National support the legislation that's going to enable public ownership of bus operations?
Because they put profit before people.
It's all untrue. Talking points can actually get claps here with your own group. A group of people would not understand. I was a child and I was a young person, ideologically blinded, but I grew up wiser. Believe me, there is always a price to pay. And National would support to increase the ability for you to realize your true potential, higher income, better job opportunities, so that we can invest into infrastructure that you and I rely upon, like health, education, and transport. Thank you.
But how does the private ownership of bus companies get better value for money for the people who are putting money into the service?
Well, you can tell how you are going to do, but I tell you one thing though, it is not them and us. It is not them and us. If you don't have a thriving economy, you cannot create the jobs opportunities that you need to be able to get the higher income to pay for things that we need as an economy and country. You can live in an utopia. You can actually say it's all going to be free, and talking points will leave you, young people, will be in debt for generations to come.
So my view is the thriving economy is made up of people and natural resources. And if we look after our people and the planet that we live on, we'll have enough for everyone. But we don't have enough for everyone if we let the richest get richer and we let the big corporates profit at the expense of public good.
I've got a question for Bruce real quick. Bruce, you've been pretty silent during this section. I'd like to know how you're going to fund the tunnel that you're proposing. Fund the tunnel.
The tunnel has already been promised through the government at the moment, through funding. So the funding's there, in theory.
In theory.
But a tram through to Island Bay serves a few people, but it doesn't serve the eastern suburbs. It doesn't serve the rest of Wellington. To me, it's a waste of time. It won't stand up financially and keep itself operating in the long term.
So as we know,
Melbourne has a better population than Wellington.
for people on the right of politics in New Zealand, money doesn't grow on trees, but it magically grows on roads, especially urban highways.
Exactly, money doesn't grow on trees. People have to work hard to create the wealth. Now, would you consider yourself wealthy, Julianne? Are you rich or poor?
Yes, I'm very wealthy in the context of the world. We all
Exactly.
are, but I'm also
so
wealthy in the context
you are
of
a
New
rich
Zealand.
person talking for the poor as if you are poor. No, I know what poor means. I know what poverty is. I grew up poor and I know exactly what it means. You can have actually rhetoric, you can have talking points, but reality is you do not speak from your own personal pocket. You actually want the young people to pay for what your ideological project is, and the shiny light rail that is going from city to
Fleur,
Island Bay
Fleur.
would do that? No, it is not going to
Hi,
solve
Karuna,
the
I'm going to have to
problem.
get you to stop now. First off, we're going to have Julianne, and then I'd like to ask Fleur if she's got any thoughts on this. But let's start with Julianne.
Yeah, Karuna, I absolutely acknowledge that you have a lot of lived experience I do not have. When it comes to advocating for transport projects, I look at the evidence about what is going to benefit the most people, including our climate and the planet. And the reality is that adding one lane for 1 kilometer in each direction in one part of the city is not going to solve congestion. It costs billions of dollars. And that money needs to be put now to transforming our public transport system so people have true options to get around without having to rely on cars and increasing carbon
Okay, I'm going to
emissions.
jump to Fleur real
You
quick.
are
Hold on,
shutting
Karuna,
off.
hold on. Fleur?
I guess my point is I don't think that Karuna's comments towards Julianne are a very good way to conduct politics. That's not the way that I want to conduct politics. I don't want to personally attack somebody for their background. We can all have different views in our lives, different things have happened to us. Our worldview is affected by them. But I know that the Labour Party and the Green Party will always put people over profit. And that to me is a fundamental principle. And as for light rail to Island Bay being a poor investment, what we have in this city is a housing crisis. We need to build more houses, and we need to build more houses in a planned way, in places where density can be done well, where it's resilient, and where we can actually build the affordable
Okay, I'm
housing
gonna have to
that
ask
the
you to wrap it
future
up, Fleur.
needs. That's why we want to have light rail to Island Bay, because that's where the density can occur.
Okay. Just before we get into the next section, I would just like to remind candidates that we're not doing a tax based on an individual's background. It's not professional, it's not fun for anyone. Cool. So, section 3 is based on climate. These questions were submitted by Generation Zero. How will you work to achieve environmental justice and protect vulnerable communities affected by climate change in Rongotai? Whoever wants to start?
I have already done some work with vulnerable communities in Ōwhiro Bay and Breaker Bay. Rongotai is a very coastal electorate. We are at the front line of dealing with sea level rise. We are going to need to have constructive conversations with those communities. And they need to be conversations which reflect that people are scared and people have their whole assets, their livelihoods at stake because of climate change. And to me, an approach to doing that has to be one which is rational, reasoned, evidence-based, and respects those people. I'd like to acknowledge James Shaw and the work that he's done on the adaptation plan. I think it's an excellent document, but what we now need to see is the policy the policy being fleshed out and made into a workable approach.
I presume vulnerable community, you mean the coastal community? As Fleur was saying, Rongotai has the longest coastline for any electorate, and we do have very unique problems that we face. And the climate change is real, and I acknowledge that. And incidents like Gabrielle is going to be frequent, and we need to deal with them. Now, we need to invest into resilient infrastructure, not only for the future, but also to reinforce the infrastructure that we already have. And that is what National will invest in.
Absolutely agree that the risks from sea level rise really affect this community. And obviously, James Shaw and the Greens have been leading work both to reduce emissions and to ensure that we're prepared to adapt. I'm really proud of the Green Party's Climate Safe Communities Plan. I encourage you all to check it out. It's about reducing emissions and adapting, especially to more frequent and severe rain events and drought. I've been working with the Houghton Valley community who've been trying to address issues around contamination in the marine reserve that stems from an old tip. And there's really awesome opportunities that would be funded through our Nature-Based Solutions Fund that would help that community achieve its desires around managing
we're gonna wrap that
stormwater
up.
effectively, bringing nature
Wrap
into
it
the
up.
city,
Wrap it up.
and adapting. Sorry.
All right.
The key is around that adaptability and resilience. Resilience comes first. We need to be prepared for the major events that are coming. But in terms of sea level rise and impact on our city, I don't see an issue there. That level of climate change is not real. We don't see that change happening. We need to keep... Coromandel got damage from on top, not from sea level rising. So that happens around. We have to adapt and build in the resilience that we need and use our, again, climate funds that go overseas to keep them in New Zealand and build our own resilience.
Okay. Just a short question. Will you commit to putting in place systems for households to divert food waste from landfill to community composting systems of anything as such, community gardens? What specific projects are you going to put in place to help with sustainability?
Yes, absolutely. The Greens have been leading on this since the Waste Minimisation Act, which was a Green MP's bill, non Tanchas. We've got local representatives, Deputy Mayor Laurie Foon and others who are absolute champions at the local level. And as a local MP working for green solutions, I'd be partnering with the community, with the different groups. There's so many groups like Kai Cycle and Seeds to Feed, so many cool local groups in this community that are passionate about finding solutions to reduce waste and to manage our land better.
Composting is such a simple and effective thing to do. Just do it. We don't need government to tell us to do it. We can just do it ourselves. Go for it.
Yes, absolutely. There's much more work to be done on food waste minimisation and reform in the waste space. I think that there is a lot to be gained through working with the council in partnership, and I too want to acknowledge Laurie Foon and her world-leading work in this area.
National Party actually voted with Labour to be part of the Paris Accord, and also we supported the 2030 emissions targets bill as well. And we would support any initiatives that will actually meet our targets, but it is a city council issue. The city council will be supported in achieving those goals. I have to say, we have to be realistic about where we draw the line. We have to, National Party announced policies to electrify New Zealand, for example, to increase sustainable energy production in New Zealand. So we will support initiatives that will meet our target goals.
I'm going to open it up to writer of reply now.
I completely agree with Karuna. We need to be realistic. If we don't reduce greenhouse gas emissions to zero very fast, we won't be able to adapt. So reducing emissions has to be our number one priority. And there are so many opportunities to do so in a way that will help improve people's lives. The only barrier is a lack of political will and a lack of willingness to take on vested interests who are profiting from the status quo. But we can do it together because we are more numerous than those vested interests. And your votes are really powerful. And we will continue organizing until we get the change we need to have a sustainable future where everyone can thrive.
Anyone want to jump in there? Anyone want to jump in? Just a quick thing then. If you, do you want to talk, Bruce? Yep, go for it.
Reducing our emissions would not really make much difference in the worldwide. It's not going to change the events that happen in Gabrielle. It's not going to change the flooding that's happening around. It's not going to change the rainstorms.
Fleur, your facial
New Zealand has
expressions.
0.017% of impact in the world, so why bother? Not why bother. Why go to all that effort?
All right. Fleur, I'd like to go to you real quick.
I think it's really sad that we are seeing in a mainstream political debate climate denialism. The climate change is real. And the sooner
Thank
you
you, it still
realise that,
exists.
I wish you were right. I really wish you were right. It would be fantastic if you were right, but unfortunately it's not the case.
In 50 years, you'll see it.
But also, our population is even smaller than our contribution. I mean, New Zealanders want to do the right thing. We're ready to step up. What is this lack of ambition saying because we're a small nation, we can't pull our weight when we have everything to gain from it?
We can do a bit. We can do the sensible stuff, be responsible with our resources, responsible with how we build things and everything else, but go spending all our economic effort in trying to stop
Okay, I'm
climate.
going to jump to
is
Karuna
not
real
gonna
quick.
happen.
Karuna's been a bit quiet. I'd like to hear your opinion on this.
Say it again.
I'd like to hear your opinion on the conversation.
Well, I already stated.
Just
Pardon?
All right,
This
we'll
is
just let
this
him
is
talk.
one of the struggles that I have. I'm always drowned by ideological blindness and also racism, discrimination. So please do not
Give it a minute.
give me a chance. Give me a chance to speak. If you ask me to say something, allow me to say. Well, I already stated climate change is real, and we supported the targets that Labour Party put together, and we voted with them. And what else can I say? I actually categorically said that we need to be real. Now, being real is not bringing the
we're gonna
emission
have
to
to wrap it
zero. If you want to go back to zero in the Stone Age, we are not going to go forward. We need to be realistic.
All right,
by-
Karuna, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Cool. Just to close off this section, can I see a hands up if you believe that climate change is real? Yeah? Climate change, rising emissions, all of that. Do you believe that climate change is real?
Climate change happens, but whether it's man-made,
Okay. We're going to move on to the next section then. Section 4 is housing. We've just got one main question for this one. So housing, increasingly unaffordable in Rongotai, both for homeowners and especially renters, as well as often being damp, mouldy and cold due to poor housing stock and negligent landlords. How will you support the development of building new, affordable, dry housing in the electorate?
I encourage you all to look at the Green Party's pledge to renters. This electorate is more renters than homeowners, and renters have got a raw deal in New Zealand since forever, and it's about time that changed. And so we can do that. We can have a warrant of fitness on rental properties. We can actually regulate the people who are responsible for property management, landlords. You have to register to own a car and put it on the road and get a warrant of fitness. Why is it that you can let out a home to someone and not have it meet standards, basic healthy home standards? But also we need to build a lot more, and we need to
Just
do
going to have to ask you to
that.
wrap it up.
More public funding to Kainga
Wrap it
Ora,
up,
to community
wrap
housing
it up,
providers.
Wrap it up. Okay. Bruce?
yeah, the question was about building more houses, and that's what I do every day. Making them affordable in Wellington effectively is almost impossible. The amount of regulations we have to do for resource consents, for building consents, just add on top of the cost of building. We have to look at different models, prefab, factory building, smaller houses, all those things which will work to some degree. There are opportunities to build higher in some places, some more dense, across the city in densities, but that is a very poor tool at the moment. It's rather hit and miss. It should be targeted to Island Bay or wherever else. But yeah, every day we can build more houses. Just need to cut down that regulation and make it simple to go ahead and build.
It's absolutely critical we have more affordable and social housing in Rongotai. Rongotai has among the most council housing tenants of anywhere in New Zealand. Those people need upgraded homes. They need a strong voice, and as a local MP, I would be committed to setting up a strong voice through a tenants' union or some other advocacy organisation for them. Labour has built more homes than any government since the 1950s. There is much more to do. Kainga Ora is well funded to be able to buy land and develop it, and we need to see much more of that in Rongotai. There's plenty of opportunities for this, and I've already been speaking to some in the community who can do this.
as Fleur pointed out, Rongotai has more than 30% in city council housing, and the renters, the landlords, actually, Kaingaora and the city council, are responsible for keeping the house standards the way it is today. Now, I would like to point out to you all, and to my fellow candidates here, when they came to power in 2017, Labour and Green promised 180,000 affordable homes. How many were built? Well, 1,800 actually.
I'm going to open it up to...
Well, National built more than that, thank you.
National sold them.
Okay, we're going to open up to right of reply now. Who wants to get started?
The reason that council hasn't been in a good position to look after its council flats is because of, again, like neoliberalism and the ideological obsession with forcing councils to sell council housing, which National brought in, wouldn't let council tenants receive the income-related rent subsidy while community housing providers could. And unfortunately, the current government didn't change that when they had the opportunity. The Greens have been campaigning hard on that. We will continue to do that. We need to give local government more money to be able to carry out its responsibilities, and we need to treat those in council housing fairly.
Hold on.
I've been probably in another universe where Labour and Green not in government for the last 6 years.
You know,
I just can't
Karuna
believe.
doesn't understand governing arrangements, so
Let's let Karuna finish.
I
Hold
just
on.
can't believe Labour and Green can actually claim to be saying all this, but they are actually in government now.
And action is being taken, like the Healthy Homes Guarantee.
What have you done in building 180,000 houses, affordable houses for people who can't afford?
Okay, let's jump back to Fleur real quick. Fleur looks like you're about to say something.
Oh no, I'm just going to say that we have built more houses.
Okay, in that case, let's jump to Julianne.
Just to be clear on governing arrangements, the Green Party has never been in a formal coalition with ministers and cabinet. And while we would love to be, and I guarantee you we can make a huge positive difference, because look, we have managed to make a huge positive difference without being in coalition, but what will give us more power, more ability to deliver our awesome policy is having more Green representation and having a Green rep who can be truly independent. I've never been silenced by my party because something was politically difficult. I can be a genuinely independent
Okay, we're going to wrap
rep.
it up. Awesome. Okay, we're going to have a final section, and then you guys can see this QR code, the link here. You can submit your own questions, and we'd really encourage you to do so. We're going to take a quick break after this last section. Again, make sure you're keeping the questions, no personal attacks on any of the candidates. Please keep them policy-based. So our last section is submitted by Voices of Aroha. What will you do to support the resettlement and integration of refugees and migrants in Rongotai?
We need to get alongside those organisations that are already providing support services, and I've had a number of discussions with them. What they want to see, as well as properly funded support services, is partnering up between people in the community. So partnering up families. There are a lot of families in Rongotai who already play a critical role in the lives of refugees, and there's so much more we can do to support those agencies, to partner up and to encourage the sharing of culture from refugees to Kiwis who have been here longer, and the other way around as well. And there's a beautiful thing that happens when we get that right, and Rongotai is well placed to do that better than anywhere else in New Zealand, I think.
It is about partnership between refugees and the community. It's the community that can make the difference, because it's touching people's lives, getting them used to how we operate in New Zealand, how to shop, how to use buses, and all those sort of things. But one of the other key things is the previous question. We need more housing for them, and somehow we have to build more houses. That is more kaingaora, but equally we have to allow landlords to rent easier, and just free up the land a bit more so that we can build more.
This is an example of the work, the mahi that people do that isn't recognised in our current economic system. Looking after our fellow human beings who are trying to escape from war and other terrible circumstances is something that is deeply important to us as human beings, and we need to make sure that we're properly resourcing that we're making the homes available, that we're making the different public institutions and public gathering areas so that people can form that community and support each other. And we also need to increase the refugee quota as well as resourcing resettlement.
As a migrant myself, I probably have better understanding than any one of my fellow candidates here as to the journey that I took as a migrant in a country where I didn't have any family or friends. The friends I made were my family. The struggle I'd gone through, you can't even empathize, I tell you. You can sympathize, but you can't empathize. I work with migrants, refugees. I know their struggle. I tell you, we are not a bicultural country anymore. We are a multicultural country. I went to a hui organized by the health department, Te Whatu Ora. We were presented by two fine gentlemen.
Okay,
One
we're gonna have
was
to wrap it up,
director of
Karuna, I'm sorry.
Pacific, one other one was director of Māori.
All right, we're going to have
Where
to
is
move
the
on to the
director of
next
ethnic?
section. Cool, sorry, Karuna, to cut you off. We're not going to do a right of reply for this section as I want to give more time for audience questions. So we're going to take a couple of minutes to have a break. If you haven't already submitted questions, go for it. Otherwise, if you don't want to submit a question, it's kind of like Reddit where you can like upvote. I'm exposing myself here, but you can upvote questions or you can downvote questions based on what you want to hear. So just go on the link. We're going to have like 3-4 minutes to do that. Otherwise, have a glass of water, get a coffee. I'll see you guys soon. First question is, what will you do to ensure that Te Tiriti is honoured in Rongotai?
As tangata Te Tiriti and a migrant to this country, I absolutely acknowledge that Te Tiriti o Waitangi, that version, is the founding document of Aotearoa, and it's by grace of Te Tiriti o Waitangi that I and my family can live here. And I'll bring that to every aspect of my work as a local MP, just as I and the Green Party have in every element of what we do. It's the charter of preceding our core principles as a party, and we bring it into all of our work as a party.
So how the treaty is treated is a national issue, it's not just a Rongotai issue, of course. But really it's bringing together of people that we all have rights, we all are important in New Zealand, we all have a voice, and that's how we should all be treated. Thank you.
As a local MP for Rongotai, I think a relationship with mana whenua is absolutely critical to upholding and respecting Te Tiriti o Waitangi. That includes mana whenua in the Chatham Islands, which is an important part of the Rongotai electorate. So I'd be wanting to meet with mana whenua soon after I was elected, understand the issues from their perspective, but also develop relationships with Kura Kaupapa School in Seatoon and other Māori leaders and Māori health providers in the Rongotai electorate to make sure I was understanding the issues from their perspective.
National Party acknowledges the treaty is the founding document of our country. Now, I had the privilege of working with Ngāi Tahu as the founding director of the Whanawara Commissioning Agency, working along with Sir Mark Solomon when he was the head of Ngāi Tahu. The intergenerational progress that we actually worked to create for the Māori in Ngāi Tahu area, South Island, is actually a great privilege for me to gain an insight into what is their need. And I have to say, as your MP, I would work with the local mana whenua and work with them to create that intergenerational progress for them. And also, I would remind them we are a multicultural society.
Bruce? Bruce has already answered. Sorry, guys. Okay. How many properties do each of you guys own?
We have our family home, which still has a mortgage.
The same half a house.
Same.
I have 1/100 of a house that is in Kapiti, owned by my wife, and I'm a renter.
How do each of you commute around your electorate, and do you own a car?
What's the question again?
Yes,
How do you
I'm
commute?
quite reliable on a car, and I'm aware that in the future that's going to need to change.
What's the question again?
How do you commute around your electorate?
By car.
By car?
A mixture of car and walking. Where I can, I walk to work and to shops, but when I have to go further, it's by car.
I mainly use a cargo bike because it's the most convenient way to get around with a lot of gear and the kids. Sometimes I take public transport. Sometimes I use a Mevo, which is a shared car. And we also share a car with some of our neighbors who also have 2 young children because we have the need for the same car seats. And they also have a cargo bike. So at the moment, we have this car that we sometimes share when we occasionally need to use it. And sometimes I have to use a taxi. Yeah, you just do whatever works best, but we can make it easier to do the more sustainable thing, the more enjoyable thing. And that's what we're here to do.
Next question. Student allowances are totally inadequate and so many students miss out. Will you support universal student allowances, and will you increase supporting raising those barriers, so increasing the barrier of student allowances? Like more students being able to access student allowance.
Yes, absolutely. Check out the Greens Guaranteed Minimum Income as well. That's in our Ending Poverty Together plan. It just shows comprehensively how if we fix our tax system and we actually ensure that those who own the most wealth pay their fair share, everyone else can live a decent life.
Student allowances should be adjusted to follow inflation, and you give us the freedom to come and study. But study is also a privilege, so we have to make that choice, whether we're studying, whether we're working.
I don't think studying is a privilege. Thank you all for studying. It's a massive public good, and it's for the future of New Zealand. I've never believed in having to borrow to live. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I organised a big petition when I was student president here to stop user pays tertiary education, introduce a universal student allowance. Unfortunately, that is not Labor policy going into this election. I want to be really clear and upfront about that because it's important to be clear.
National will actually inflation adjust it, but I would like to actually share the history. Working for families, allowance was introduced by a national government in 91. And when Labor came to power, they didn't do anything about it until 2005 by increasing it by just $15. And then again, National, when came back to power, increased it to $72. So National will continue to support the people who need help, but also create the opportunities so that you can have do not laugh, go and look at Google it, you'll find it. And National will create the economic condition where you can get better job opportunities, and also so that you can get higher income, pay off your student loan and student allowances, so that you can have the equal opportunity.
All right, wrap it up. I've got one more question. Landlords routinely have a reputation for not taking care of their rental properties and leaving tenants with mouldy, damp and uninsulated properties. How do we ensure that landlords in the electorate are providing housing that is healthy and livable for tenants?
Our policy is to create standards that will meet the healthy home, and we actually support a Labour Party and the review that is being carried out. And if the review is not carried out by the time the new government comes in, we will continue to do it and implement those review recommendations.
So from 1 July 2024, every home will need to comply with the Healthy Home Guarantee. An important part of a local MP's job is holding landlords who don't comply to account, and I commit to doing that if I become the local Member of Parliament.
Yes, the rules are there, as just said, but it is a matter of allowing landlords to do that. A lot of landlords I know are doing that work slowly and as they are able, but again, it must be, as a business for them, they must be able to claim those expenses as well.
Our pledge to renters is to introduce a warrant of fitness on rental properties and to properly resource the public sector to enforce it. You know, when they talk about making cuts in the back office, what that usually means is making cuts to the enforcement of the laws that we already have. But the current laws aren't good enough. The Healthy Home Standards don't specify any heating or minimum temperature for bedrooms or curtains for bedrooms. It could be a lot better. And if people can't afford to turn on the heater, what's the point in it being there? So look at the Greens' comprehensive plan to deal with that.
So just as a final thing, can you guys hear me? Cool. You have 45 seconds to give us your elevator pitch. Tell us why you're the most qualified candidate for Rongotai. Yeah, let's start with Karuna. We're going to work our way down then. Or whoever wants to go first, honestly.
I can go.
Okay.
I empathize. I live the difficulties of what you feel. I understand what Rongotai residents want because I live there. I lived there for the last 24 years. And I am ambitious for myself and for my children and the future generation and for every voter in Rongotai. At the moment, they are hurting. They are hurting because the current government borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and spent on things that they shouldn't have been spending. National would invest in the future of Rongotai by investing in infrastructure, health and education that we all need. And I would actually pledge to come back to you every 3 months to listen to you.
Cool. All right, Fleur.
Well, thanks for the question. And I guess what I would say is that as a city councillor, I personally responded to every email, phone call or text message I received because an important part of democracy is local representation. And the local MP's job is to advocate for people no matter what their background or their politics and to make sure that you have deep connections within all communities. That's the approach I took as a city councillor. And it's the approach I would continue to take if I was successful in becoming the local Member of Parliament. Kia ora.
This is the job of the local MP is to advocate for the community. However, we've seen recently that most local MPs get bought up into the big party machine and have to vote on party lines and follow party lines. So you're losing that chance of having an advocate. So if you want something local representation, you have to vote someone who's not in a major party.
The sustainable, equitable future that we all want is right there. We can create it. We can work together to tackle the climate crisis. We can make sure everyone has what they need. But to do it, we need system change. That system change has to happen at central government. You elect your local MP to make those changes at central government. And you know, based on my track record and the Greens, I will fight for that change. I will never, ever sit back and take you for granted. We are running out of time, and the time is now. The time is now for the change we need is green.
That wraps us up for today. Thank you once again to VUWSA. Thank you to Voices of Aroha. Thank you for Generation Zero for putting on this event. Make sure you follow all those groups on Instagram. There is going to be the Wellington Central Debate led very soon. We do have, very conveniently, the Electoral Commission just set up over here to make sure that all of your details are up to date so you can actually vote. And thank you once again for our candidates for being here. Cool. Thank you so much.